Welcome to the Future of Financial Reporting, a Question of Influence. My name's Kerry-Ann Ross and I'm a Senior Policy Advisor and Reporting Specialist at Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand. Joining me today are Rachel Grimes and Rob Ward. Rachel is the President of the International Federation of Accountants, or IFAC. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you, it's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to the topic.
Rob is the Head of Leadership and Advocacy at Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand. Hello, Rob.
It's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to the dialogue.
So my first question's to you, Rachel. What's your view of the current financial reporting landscape? What works well, and how are Australia and New Zealand involved at an international level?
In regards to the financial reporting landscape, what's working well is a global involvement. I sit on the nominating committee, I'm the deputy chair of that committee, and to see the involvement from right around the world and the capacity that people want to contribute, particularly to the accounting profession, is such a positive thing. And I can tell you that Australia and New Zealand are well represented on every standards board, but particularly in regards to IFRS, where our voice is heard. People respect the Australia and New Zealand position, particularly as both countries and economies came out of 2008 so well, that our opinion is sought and they want our involvement on those committees, and we are key influencers.
And has that view changed at all over the past 10 years that Australia and New Zealand have had IFRS? Was IFRS the right move for us?
Well, I think because our economy did so well, 7, 8 years ago, that our opinion is so respected. We were early adopters of IFRS. Some of that, people will argue that that's some of the reasons that our economy was able to survive and that capital flows continued into Australia. Some economies who didn't have that advantage, and those capital flows weren't there. I can tell you in terms of my mergers and acquisitions career that many countries I went to, I was offered 4 sets of accounts. That included the statutory, the tax, the management and the family accounts. We couldn't contribute, we couldn't do due diligence on those accounts, and therefore the capital flows just couldn't occur. So I think IFRS is such an important landscape, and that we need to continue to be keen adopters of it.
And how about you, Rob? Have you seen the financial reporting landscape change much over that time? What are your thoughts on where we're at?
I'm very optimistic about the financial reporting landscape, not only where we are now, but where we've come from and where we are going to. 10, 15 years ago, early stages of my career, there are as many accounting standards regimes as there were countries. And that just isolated Australia and New Zealand. Actually, it isolated all the individual markets. So the collaboration and pulling together of IFRS and, on the other hand, US GAAP was a great step forward, and in fact makes us more relevant. So where are we today? We have a great body of knowledge in IFRS. Some are critical of it in terms of its complexity and this huge body of knowledge that is quite daunting. But we've got a great platform for the future, and I think that's what this whole Future Inc. Segment is about how can we build off this platform to leverage Australia and New Zealand and actually every participant in IFRS. How can we make it even work better for us in the markets?
And you mentioned US GAAP there, Rob. Now, we know there was a path to convergence with IFRS happening, but seemed to stall around the time of the global financial crisis. What happened there?
It's just too big for the US to handle. They had other things to do, quite understandably, to stabilise the US economy. But I think maybe we should revisit that, because taking out another layer where you don't have to reconcile US GAAP and IFRS would again enhance the financial reporting landscape.
What about Europe's involvement? Some people say that the EU has far too much influence over IFRS. Do they dominate the agenda, or do countries like Australia and New Zealand get a fair go?
I don't accept any one country dominates IFRS. Australia and New Zealand have in the past and will continue to punch above our weight. We won't accept a position that we don't agree with. So I'd rather the Europeans and all the other subscribers to IFRS be involved. I think that's for everybody's benefit. It's a lot better than being ambivalent and not engaged. So the more involvement and engagement, the better.
In relation to dominance, you look at Europe with however many countries they'll have at this point in time, but let's say they've got 27 countries, and therefore, they put up, each one of those countries puts up a member to be on that committee, to be on that board. But it's looked at it from a global point of view. It's not dominated by Europe at all. If you look at the membership breakup, and once again, Australia and New Zealand have been well represented on that and are keen influencers. And they also have the technical advisors with all the expertise and support, often from the major firms, and that is influencing Australia's position and putting that point of view forward. It is not dominated just by Europe.
Now, you've both touched on the subject of influence there, so let's explore that further. Rob, why do Australia and New Zealand need to influence? How do we influence the international reporting landscape?
Influence is an interesting thing, and why does Australia and New Zealand, or all the territories that our body represents, have to influence? Because if you don't, you'll be left behind. And funnily enough, geographically, we're remote from the rest of the world. How have we responded to that? Australians and New Zealanders travel a lot or get involved. And why? That's to be included. And because we are at the table, we do have an opinion, and that opinion is respected because it's well-founded and we're prepared to express it, that we can and do influence. We have done so long as I've been in my career, and it's going to continue for the foreseeable, no, not for the foreseeable future, right into the future.
Okay, so let's put history to the side for 1 second and get the crystal ball out. What does the future of financial reporting look like?
The landscape will always need to change, or in fact it will. We won't force it, it just will around us. And I think clearly digital or online everyday reporting to me seems like a long-term opportunity for the development of financial reporting. The year end, the concept of June or 31 March or 31 December is really old around the seasons, Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere, in the winters when all the crops were finished. That's what year ends were about and established by governments. But now in a digital world, every second is a period end. So what's the difference? That many of the transactions, and we know that 90% of the world's data has been created, in the last 2 or 3 years. And that means we're accessing a lot more information online, real time. So financial reporting in a digital world is a great opportunity for us. And it'll overcome what is a very static reporting at the moment, which is known as the annual report. And people pick up the annual report, a lot of users, and their eyes glaze over. And so the opportunity is to report in a different way, in a way that's more inquiry-based, easier to look at, and not just in a big tablet format.
And Rachel, what's your view of financial reporting in a digital world?
I think in terms of the digital transformation, that's happening within corporates all the time now. Our management accounting, we want real time, we want daily reports, and I think that's just going to extend and be demanded by advisors, by shareholders, by banking authorities, so the regulators, etc. I think that absolutely is going to come. So how do we get there? How do the accounting profession work with technology to make sure that we've got that right amount of information flow, that transparency that we demand? The days of picking up the annual report 5 months after a possible year end makes that information almost redundant in such an evolutionary period that we live in today.
So exciting times ahead. How do we get on the front foot and make sure that we continue to have that influence into the future?
In a digital world, Australia and New Zealand have a great advantage. We're agile, we're early adopters of technology, we're prepared to have a go. So the best way we can influence the shaping of a new digital reporting world is, again, be at the table, don't be scared to apply our knowledge and skills. We are close to, and take our banks, some of our biggest companies, they're world class. They understand how current day contemporary reporting is working and evolving, and by involvement of all of those stakeholders, we can certainly influence the outcome. In fact, we have a big advantage being a little bit smaller, but sophisticated. Sometimes it's harder when you're a big economy, the obvious ones, that are very sophisticated but slower to move.
The Australia and New Zealand corporates are, world leaders in a number of fronts, and early adoption is one of them. Technology, they grab hold of it. Some of the Australian banks are in the top 100 companies in the world by market capitalisation. We have the opportunity to explore things in this economy. But I think what we need to do is come together and have a view from Australia and New Zealand. We need to get the regulators together with government authorities. We need the big companies there. We need the SMEs there. We need the preparers there. We need the auditors there. We need to have a view that we share, and that a view that we can go forward with a united view to the rest of the world when we do have a seat at the table on the global stage. And I think that's crucial, that we get that engagement from everybody and get that, agreed view and go forward.
Kerry-Ann, one of our other futuring topics that we're working on right now is the regulator of the future. What will the regulator look like? Will that regulator just be an enforcer after the event? Or how will they leverage data? How will they stay in touch online, real time, and stay up with the game, let alone after the event? And so I think reporting is going to head the same way, that you can't have regulators, particularly say take blockchain and peer-to-peer economy where it's all too late. Well, the same with financial reporting. It will have to be much more right here and now. And so that's why I'm optimistic about where we are with the body of knowledge that we have in place right now. If we didn't have it, we'd have no chance.
And what about IFRS in all of that? Can you see a time when Australia and New Zealand might need to exit IFRS and go for another regime?
Should Australia and New Zealand exit IFRS? No way. That'd be like exiting the global community and reporting community or economy. It's not going to happen. We've been the benefactors of a globalised world. We've been brought closer to big markets. We need the big markets to leverage our small scale. So rather than just leveraging internally off a collection of 25 or 6 million in between Australia and New Zealand, we can leverage through a global market, and through financial reporting and other mechanisms we do that.
If I reflect on any other profession I can think of, accounting is a true global profession. Why? Because we're all adopting the same rules. And that allows us to have a global passport to travel the world and to share our skills and our profession with many different economies, many different people, in many different corporates, and we have the same set of rules. For Australia and New Zealand to exit IFRS would set us back, our profession in Australia and New Zealand, back many years, and wouldn't give us a global passport for the world. We are the recipients. Australia and New Zealand are capital importers. We need for the rest of the world to have confidence in our standards, in what our financial reports are showing, and therefore we need to play, or we become very isolated from the rest of the world.
Now, there are some large countries that are still yet to adopt IFRS in full, but they're on a pathway to doing so. What impact do you think that will have in the future? Will that change Australia and New Zealand's ability to influence?
The major players that are still to fully adopt IFRS, such as China and India, will get there eventually. It's only part of a process for both of those economies, which, funnily enough, are still called developing nations. Quite ironic. Here we have China, I think it's still called a developing nation, second largest economy in the world. So it's only a matter of time before all their systems become sophisticated and fully integrated. Will that change our influence? Only if we let it. And we're not going to let it. So it's one of the great things about IFRS, and sometimes it's one of the negatives of the system of involvement around the world. It slows things down sometimes. Some criticism that we're a little bit slow to move along because of so many people involved. And you know what? If that's one of the costs of not moving as fast as some of us would like, some of us impatient people, then so be it if it includes people. And so no, I'm very confident we'll continue to stay involved even as the bigger economies fully integrate and adopt IFRS.
I can tell you on the global stage, China and India also have a very active voice. They put many people up for the respective standard setting boards, all of them. You know, they're well represented in both of those. They want to learn from other developed countries and economies. And, you know, whilst it is taking them some time, I'm confident that they will get there and that they will adopt IFRS.
Now, do you have a final message on the future of financial reporting and our ability to influence it?
Carrie-Anne, that's a great question about where are we heading and how do we see the future landscape of financial reporting. In my opening remarks, I mentioned we're very optimistic, and that's how I feel. We've made a huge leap over the last 15, 20 years, and we've got a lot to do in the future. So I'm optimistic. I know the Australian-New Zealand spirit will continue to be involved and will help influence and shape the landscape and have a great time doing it.
I'm proud to be part of the profession in Australia and New Zealand that has an active voice. When you look at when the standards are released as exposure drafts, how many people from Australia and New Zealand make an actively participate in putting forward their views on those standards. That's crucial. That counts. And to be part of that and to want to be part of that is fantastic. And I'm confident that both Australia and New Zealand will continue to do that. And please become involved. If you want to be involved in coming on one of the standard setting boards, put your hand up. We'd love to hear from you.
Rachel, Rob, thank you both for sharing your thoughts with us on this topic.